My name is Marina Ellsworth, 42 years old, and for the last 12 years I've been the person who kept CoreLink systems from falling apart. I was never the loudest voice in meetings, never the one to brag at happy hour. My strength was precision, the kind of quiet diligence that made sure federal checklists matched signatures, that cross-border data moved without raising red flags. I thought that kind of loyalty mattered. That morning, I walked out of HR with a manila folder clutched to my chest. Restructuring. They called it. My role no longer aligned with their vision. No eye contact. No thank you. Just papers signed in triplicate and a flat directive to hand in my badge before 3 o'clock. I moved down the corridor, my shoes clicking against polished tile that suddenly felt hostile. At the lobby turn, I slowed. There, on the front desk by the half-dead office plants, lay a sheet of paper, curling at the corners. It was my face, my ID photo printed in black and white, thick red marker slashed across the top. Do not let her back on the floor. The words tilted across my features like a wound. I stood frozen, watching a security guard shuffle papers, pretending not to notice me. In that moment, 12 years of overnight fixes, missed holidays, and quiet competence collapsed into one ugly sign. Not Marina Ellsworth, Senior Compliance Liaison. Not a colleague, just a warning. I wanted to laugh or scream or demand an explanation. Instead, my throat locked, the humiliation burned, but under it there was something stranger, an eerie calm, as if the decision had been made for me long before today. I adjusted the strap of my bag and walked past the desk without a word. Outside, Cleveland's winter air cut sharp against my face, raw and bracing. The city felt louder, freer, even as my heart pounded with shock. I had nothing in my hands but a thin folder, yet I carried the weight of everything I'd built for them. My desk was still upstairs, waiting for me to pack it into a cardboard box. And that was where I headed next. I kept my head down as I walked back to my corner of the floor. The hum of keyboards and chatter faltered when people noticed me, then picked up again, louder than usual, like they thought noise could erase my presence. My desk sat just as I'd left it that morning, 3 monitors still glowing, a mug with lipstick faint at the rim, a small plant leaning toward the fluorescent light. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the flattened cardboard box HR had provided, the kind you see in sitcoms when a character loses their job. Except this wasn't a laugh track. Each item I placed inside landed with a quiet thud. The mug, a notebook with scrawled compliance notes, the spare cardigan I kept for over-air-conditioned nights, across the aisle. My assistant Eli glanced up. He was 25, sharp in a raw, unpolished way. His lips formed the words, "I'm sorry." I managed a small smile, a silent reply of, "Not your fault." His eyes dropped back to his screen, though his hands hovered above the keyboard, stilled by guilt he couldn't voice. I slid my badge from the lanyard around my neck. The plastic felt heavier than it should have. No speech, no declaration, no promise they'd regret it, just the soft click of the badge landing on the desk. My final punctuation mark. The elevator ride down was mercifully empty. By the time I reached the parking lot, the box felt awkward in my arms, like carrying something that had died but hadn't been buried yet. I set it on the passenger seat and closed the door gently. Driving home through gray Cleveland streets, I let the silence spread, thick and heavy. The box shifted with each turn, a coffin of small objects and long years. My hands gripped the wheel. Remembering another December the Christmas Eve, I spent hunched over a server rack instead of at my parents' table. My mother had saved me a plate of ham and potatoes that turned cold before I walked through the door at 2 a.m. I told myself then it was worth it. That loyalty mattered. Now, all I had to show for it sat in a cardboard box beside me. The house was still when I carried the box inside. I set it on the kitchen table, but I couldn't bring myself to open it again. Everything inside felt tainted, as if the air from the office had followed me home. Instead, I walked to the hallway closet and knelt down, pushing aside winter coats and the printer I'd sworn I'd repair. My hand found the cool edge of the fireproof file box. On its side, in my careful handwriting, was one word: contingency. I dragged it out and clicked open the latches. Neatly tabbed folders lined the interior: legal, clearance, protocols, red flags, years of quiet paranoia organized into categories no one at CoreLink ever asked about. They thought my compulsions were quirks. Marina, the over-preparer, the woman who always had 3 backup drives. They never realized the weight of what I was holding. Flipping through the files, I stopped at the thickest binder, the original Macrovia Acquisition Protocol. My name was printed at the bottom of every page: Marina Ellsworth, third-party clearance liaison. Not just a courtesy credit, it meant the entire deal, all $300 million of it, funneled through my clearance authority. I turned to the last section, the one I'd circled in red ink months ago. Clause 9C. My eyes scanned the lines I already knew by heart. Termination of named liaison without formal substitution and recertification voids, compliance status, and suspends legal standing of acquisition protocol. Plain language if they fired me and didn't replace me with someone fully trained and certified, which took 6 months minimum. The merger collapsed under its own paperwork. No signature. No exceptions. I sat back in the chair, the edges of the document biting into my palms. For years, I'd wondered if I was being dramatic, if keeping a file like this was just my way of soothing old scars from being overlooked. But staring at those words, I understood. I hadn't been paranoid. I had been prepared. They thought they'd erased me with a printed photo at security. Instead, they had handed me the very fuse that could turn their victory into ash. I carried the binder into my small home office, set it beside the laptop I hadn't touched in weeks, and pressed the power button. The machine hummed awake, its screen throwing pale light across the room. My fingers hesitated on the keyboard. This wasn't rage. It wasn't even payback. It was procedure and action I had trained for, buried in the fine print, waiting for the moment they pretended I was optional. I logged into my certificate authority account, the portal only I could access. 2-factor prompts blinked in sequence, codes sliding across my phone. At last, the dashboard appeared, a clean grid of credentials tied to my name. The final one glowed green: third-party clearance, Macrovia Acquisition, active, valid, binding. I clicked through the menu, heart thudding but hands steady. The button was simple, almost banal: revoke credential. A warning message filled the screen. Are you sure you want to revoke this certificate? This action is time-stamped and irreversible. Yes, I thought. I was sure. My fingerprint pressed against the reader, and the status bar crawled across the screen until the green icon flickered out, replaced by red: revoked, effective immediately. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the screen. Then I reached for my phone and scrolled to Daniel's number. My lawyer picked up on the second ring. Voice calm, familiar. Daniel. It's Marina. They let me go this morning. I heard papers shuffle on his end. I figured something was coming. Did you keep control of your liaison credential? I just revoked it. He paused, then said, Good. That's personal authority. Marina. They can't claim ownership, as of now. They have no compliance bridge. His voice carried no triumph, only certainty. Document everything. So I did. Screenshots of the dashboard, downloaded audit logs, even printed the confirmation page and slid it into the contingency binder. For good measure, I ran copies through my home notary stamp, the blue ink pressing into paper like a seal of finality. The room was silent except for the whir of the old laptop fan. On the screen, the revoked certificate pulsed red, like a warning beacon. The bridge they had built their deal on no longer existed. The revoked certificate glowed red on my laptop screen when Daniel's name flashed across my phone. His tone was clipped, professional, but I could hear the undercurrent of disbelief. Macrovia just called me. Their system rejected the final handshake. They want to know why your signature isn't in place. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. Patch me through. There was a click. Then a new voice entered the line. Calm, courteous, practiced. This is Greg Taylor, compliance officer for Macrovia Group. We've been reviewing the final checklist. Your credential is listed as the sole third-party clearance. Are you experiencing technical issues? I let the silence hang for a second. No, there are no technical issues. They terminated me yesterday. The phone line went dead quiet. I could almost hear him scanning documents, flipping through screens, looking for any loophole to turn my words into an error. When he spoke again, his voice had shifted no warmth, only the weight of recognition. They terminated the named liaison without substitution. Yes, my badge is revoked, access disabled. I'm no longer employed at CoreLink Systems. Another pause, papers rustled, muffled voices in the background. Then Greg said, measured and precise. In that case, we'll need to halt all pending authorizations immediately. Escrow transfers are frozen until further notice. Daniel cut in. His lawyer's voice sharpened to a blade. Macrovia will receive formal notice by the end of today. Ms. Ellsworth no longer represents CoreLink in any capacity. Compliance obligations under Clause 9C are unmet. Understood, Greg replied. We'll initiate suspension protocol. The line disconnected. I set the phone down on the desk, my hand resting against the cool edge of the binder still open beside me. 2 hours ago, I'd walked out of that building with a cardboard box and the hollow ache of humiliation. Now, the largest merger CoreLink had ever trumpeted was collapsing under its own paperwork. I didn't smile. I didn't cheer. I simply breathed, steady and full, as if the air itself had changed weight around me. The deal was no longer moving forward. By late morning, the first ripples had started inside CoreLink. A message appeared in a private Slack channel, half curiosity, half alarm, asking if anyone had checked the compliance logs. Someone mentioned a Clause 9C, the kind of obscure reference most employees had never even heard of. Eli, my assistant, was in that channel. He'd always had the quick reflexes of someone who grew up online, fingers too fast for his better judgment. He pulled up the draft protocol from the shared drive, highlighted the section, and dropped a screenshot into the chat. The words sat there in black and white, termination of named liaison without formal substitution and recertification voids compliance status. Within minutes, the screenshot spread. A junior analyst forwarded it to legal. Someone else pasted it into a general thread. By the time the clock hit noon, panic was rolling through the building. The legal team abandoned their offices, storming down hallways with binders under their arms. Compliance officers froze 3 pending invoices mid-approval. The general counsel reportedly shouted for someone to find out who authorized the termination, his voice echoing off glass walls. Meanwhile, my phone vibrated on the desk. The caller ID flashed the name of CoreLink's CFO. Once. That would have sent me scrambling, eager to prove myself useful. Now. I let it ring until the screen went dark. A second call came, then a third. Each one went unanswered. I turned the phone face down and returned to the quiet of my living room. The hum of my refrigerator, the faint creak of old floorboards, the weight of silence, it all felt steadier than any boardroom applause I had ever heard. By early afternoon, the whispers escaped the building. A short post appeared on a finance blog. Vague but pointed, unnamed Ohio-based tech firm faces, compliance halt. Merger may be in jeopardy. They didn't have to name CoreLink. Everyone watching the deal knew. I poured myself a glass of water and stood by the window, watching bare branches scrape against the March sky. The story was already spreading on its own, faster than any statement or excuse they could manufacture. The email arrived just after 9 the next morning, stamped with HR's neutral header. The subject line read, Reinstatement Opportunity. I opened it slowly, almost amused by the careful wording. They were offering me double my previous salary, a new title, Director of Strategic Compliance, and a promise to welcome me back into the CoreLink family. Family. The same people who had taped my photo to a desk like I was a trespasser now wanted to call me family. I let the email sit for a moment, the words blurring in front of my eyes. It wasn't anger I felt, or triumph, just clarity. I forwarded it to Daniel, within minutes. He called. "We're not letting this slide into sentimentality," he said. His voice was firm, steady. The anchor I needed. "You're not an employee anymore. Marina, you're an entity. That night," he drafted the reply. The language was surgical. "Ms. Ellsworth appreciates your revised offer. However, as of March 2nd, she no longer holds employee status at CoreLink Systems. Should your organization wish to re-engage her expertise, Quiet Seal LLC is available for limited licensing of relevant services. Market rates apply, retainer required, engagement subject to availability, no apologies, no nostalgia, just terms." The next day, Eli texted me a single line. Everyone's seen the reply. Apparently, someone inside HR had dropped the email thread into a staff channel. The response spread faster than gossip ever had, in break rooms and private chats. Employees repeated my name with a kind of hushed awe. The way people talk about legends who walked the same halls but played a different game. I pictured them in that office, staring at the same photo still taped at security, now paired with the knowledge that the woman they'd erased was setting the price of their survival. I closed my laptop and leaned back, letting the silence settle. CoreLink had drawn their line when they pushed me out. I was drawing mine now, not in red marker across a photo, but in ink that bound contracts. The courier showed up just after lunch, his breath steaming in the cold air when I opened the door. He carried a slim package, square and heavy for its size, sealed with gold-embossed tape, no sender listed, just a return address in New York. I signed for it, curiosity prickling at the back of my neck, and carried it to the kitchen. Inside was a velvet box the color of midnight. I eased it open and found, nestled in silk, a handwritten note on thick stationery. The script was steady, deliberate. "Next time, they'll know who built the bridge." No signature, but I recognized the seal at the top, Macrovia's CEO, the man whose smile had been plastered across investor decks, who'd stood on stage boasting about the seamless integration my clearance made possible. He hadn't sent a contract, or an offer, or even a request. Just acknowledgement, clean, quiet recognition. I closed the box gently, setting it on the shelf beside my contingency binder. For the first time in days, the knot in my chest loosened. The applause I'd never gotten in conference rooms had arrived in the form of 6 handwritten words. That evening, a gray Lexus pulled into my driveway. A man in a blazer stepped out, clutching a manila envelope. He rang the bell twice, waited, then paced across the porch. I watched from the shadows of the living room, lights off, the faint hum of jazz floating from the radio. He checked his phone, muttered something under his breath, and finally wedged the envelope into the screen door before returning to his car. I didn't move until his taillights disappeared down the street. Only then did I open the door, take the envelope in hand, and let the wind carry it into the yard. I didn't need to read it. I knew what it said: offers, apologies, attempts to erase what couldn't be undone. The velvet box remained on the shelf, catching the last rays of afternoon sun. That was the acknowledgement I chose to keep. The announcement came on a gray Thursday morning. 4 clinical sentences from Macrovia, delivered to the wire services at 7:13 a.m. Stripped of flourish due to unresolvable compliance gaps and personnel discrepancies, Macrovia Group is terminating its acquisition proceedings with CoreLink Systems. By 9 o'clock, CoreLink's stock had begun to slide, numbers bleeding red across trading screens. By noon, it was in freefall. Calls flooded investor lines, angry questions piling faster than scripted answers. The CFO, pale and hollow-eyed, resigned over a webcast. citing new opportunities and time with family. No one believed him. Tate, the COO who had strutted through his first all-hands with a grin sharp enough to cut glass, now faced investors who no longer returned his calls. His buzzwords couldn't bridge the crater. Then, like a match on dry timber, the photo appeared on LinkedIn. My face, printed and scrawled over in red marker, "Do not let her back on the floor." Someone had leaked it from the security desk. The caption read, "This is how you treat 12 years of loyalty." Within hours, it spread beyond former employees. Clients reposted it. Journalists screen capped it. Even Macrovia's compliance chief liked the post. A tiny digital nod that carried the weight of an anvil. I didn't comment. I didn't add my voice to the chorus. Instead, I stood in my kitchen, pouring coffee into a chipped mug, watching the steam rise and curl in the morning light. On the table beside me lay the velvet box, its lid still closed. Outside, the neighborhood moved with the usual rhythm: kids waiting for buses, neighbors scraping ice from windshields. The world beyond CoreLink kept turning. From my window, I imagined the boardroom downtown, thick with panic. Voices raised over each other as the empire they'd sworn was unshakable folded in real time. My phone buzzed on the counter: messages, calls, headlines, but I didn't reach for it. The storm no longer required my hand. I simply sat, coffee warm between my palms, while the company that had erased me unraveled on its own weight. Weeks passed, and the noise around CoreLink's implosion settled into a dull background hum. Headlines shifted to new scandals, new market dramas. For me, life took on a different rhythm. My home office, once just a spare bedroom with a creaky desk, now carried the weight of something alive. The framed certificate of incorporation for Quiet Seal LLC hung on the wall above my monitors. By the end of the first month, I had 3 clients. 2 were mid-sized firms that wanted the same kind of integration bridges I had quietly built for years. The third, almost poetic, was CoreLink itself. They had no choice but to license one of my old systems, the very infrastructure they once dismissed as legacy clutter. They signed at 4 times the original cost. No arguments, no attempts at charm. Their emails were brisk, professional, and careful. For the first time, the balance was mine. One afternoon, I reached for the velvet box and set it on the same shelf as my business license. The gold seal of Macrovia gleamed faintly against the matte black velvet. On the shelf, side by side, sat acknowledgement and independence. Between them, a quiet story only I needed to understand. I leaned back in my chair, letting sunlight spill across the desk. My inbox pinged with new messages: not late-night emergencies, not demands to fix disasters others had caused, but clean requests for services, consultations, proposals. Each one came on my terms. I wrapped my hands around a warm cup of coffee, breathing in the steady calm of the morning. For years, I had been the invisible bridge, the one who kept everything standing while others posed for cameras. That version of me was gone. Now, I was the toll gate, the condition, the terms. And as the light moved slowly across the room, I finally felt what it meant to own the silence.